When I was around 16, there were a few things of which I was absolutely positive. They were as follows. I didn't want to learn how to drive because the insurance would be too expensive on my grandparents. My mother was the last person in the known world with which I wanted to have any interaction at all. I would be out of my grandparents' house by the time I was 18 because I didn't want to be a further burden. I was going to graduate high school, go directly to college, get my degree, and become an English teacher. I didn't have many friends because I wasn't a likable person and I was difficult to get along with. I didn't have someone to date because no one wanted to date me because I was unattractive. I was fat and likely to remain so. It was okay that no one found me attractive because dating was a bad thing anyway. I would never drink alcohol. Despite my Star Trek addiction, I would never meet Kate Mulgrew because I would never be able to afford to go to a convention. I would always put my family's needs before my own. I would likely never leave the southern United States because I couldn't afford to go on a vacation. Once out of my home, I was going to live alone in an efficiency apartment, probably with a bunch of cats. And I would always be alone. At the age of 16, I was certain that I was destined to live a very lonely life filled with family obligations and lists of expectations from those around me, all of which I would fulfill because that is what I had always done. I spent most of my young life trying to please my grandparents and not be the hard-headed, overly temperamental, difficult, emotional, and angry person my family told me I was. Though my memories of those events are filled with my mother's side of the family telling me that I was overreacting and I was being irrational, and my father's side of the family said very, very little at all. And I just wanted to be what my granny said I ought to be, which was a person who could live on their own without needing help from anyone. She wanted me to be a person that could stand alone and never have to worry about finances nor need to lean on anyone for support of any kind. She said I ought to be practical about life and know that nothing comes from doing nothing. And that includes crying over anything. She said I needed to realize that no one was ever really on my side, and the only person I could rely on was myself because people were naturally selfish and only out to do things for themselves. And based on my life at that time and all the things that were going on, those thoughts, they seemed very reasonable and completely true. I wanted what she wanted for me because she said that was the very best way to live my life, and I had never known her to be wrong. She passed away when I was 18 years old, and it was probably one of the worst experiences of my life so far. There is nothing quite like losing the woman who raised you just before finals of your first semester of your freshman year of college to drive home the point that you cannot, in fact, handle everything that life throws at you. The turmoil that followed would make a fantastic soap opera with the drama and overreaction and suspense and death and other things that make for a really great daytime TV show but a really crappy life. And it was hard. And it sucked. But it was also probably one of the best experiences of my life despite being one of the worst. Because because it forced me to find a sense of self where before I had only been doing what my granny said I should be. And now I had no direction because she wasn't there to constantly remind me of what I should be doing, and she wasn't there to be my safety net and tell me that the reason this family member or that family member was acting the way they were was because they didn't care. I had to figure that out on my own. And after a small breakdown and some crying when no one was around, I stepped away from everything I once considered the core of who I was. I walked away from my family and a lot of my friends because I realized that where I was in the lineup of my family was a cesspool that was only going to bring me down. And where I was mentally was going to drag down my friends. I needed a clean break to restart myself. So I walked away and I learned how to be a person that was confident in my abilities and a person who knew who I was, not who I was expected to be. And it was a hard process. And I relapse from time to time. I have moments when there's an interaction with a family member I've let back into my life, and I have to question myself and ask myself if I am still that 16-year-old who was angry and irrational about life. And I have to say that I really don't think I am. I'm not that person anymore. And I cannot put into words how grateful I am not to be the angry, ill-tempered, misunderstood, depressed, beat-down, overwhelmed teenager that no one ever told it gets better and was often told it gets worse. Today is my birthday. My granny's been dead for over a decade now. I've not spoken to my grandfather in over 2 years. My mother and I are very, very close. And my father and I are not as close as we once were. I own my own car. I live independently. I am not a teacher. I have a lot of good friends, and I have a few very close friends that I trust implicitly. I have a wonderful partner that I feel I will spend the rest of my life with, who loves me even in my low points and expects nothing of me in return but to love her, which I do, very, very much so. I don't think I'm ugly. I know I'm not really fat. I drink a little. I've met Kate Mulgrew. I don't put all of my family's needs before my own because I've learned that my needs also matter. I've been outside the southern United States, and I have vacationed outside of the southern United States. I live in an apartment much larger than Efficiency, and I have a dog. I actually don't like cats very much. I am not alone. I am not alone. I am not alone. And I am eternally thankful of all of this because at 16, I was positive the only absolute in my life was I would always be alone. Life gets better. You just have to hang in there.